I'm Alan Wakim with the Sons of History, and today we have a very special treat. We are going to be interviewing Daniel Flores, who is an author, published author, and he's going to be in an upcoming movie about some of his adventures and things that he witnessed while he served our country in Afghanistan. So I want to welcome you to Dan Flores. Daniel, thank you for joining us here on the Sons of History.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So first, a couple of questions just for the basics. Your full name and your rank from the time you began until your final rank with the military.
My full name obviously is just Daniel Flores. Have no middle name. We weren't rich enough when I was born to get one. I started off in the Army, enlisted, and with enlisted I made up to the rank of E5. From there I became a warrant officer, went to flight school and all, and after flying in the Army for 21 years flying in the Army, I finished off as a Chief Warrant Officer 4 as an instructor pilot in the Apache helicopter with the United States Army Reserves here in Conroe, Texas.
Okay. And now, are you still doing reserves now, or?
No, I retired from the Army Reserves in 2011 after 26 and a half years total time, both enlisted and as a warrant officer. Okay. So 5 years enlisted, 11 Bravos by MOS, Military Occupational Skill, which is infantry. And with that I also became a long-range Recon patrol soldier with Company G 143rd Infantry, which was with the Texas Army National Guard. But active duty, I was infantry at 4th Infantry Division in Fort Carson, Colorado.
Okay. And what are you doing now?
Now I currently fly for, I'm an air interdiction agent with Customs and Border Protection, the agency formerly known as U.S. Customs. But after, obviously, 9/11, Homeland Security became a new agency, and so U.S. Customs was done away with. And now I'm with Customs and Border Protection, flying here over the Houston area, both airplanes and helicopters, and now a lot lately flying down on the southwest border, El Paso. I was just there last week for 2 weeks in El Paso for that huge surge of illegals that are coming up there. It's out of control. The whole border is. So that's what I do now. Is I'm a federal agent with Customs and Border Protection.
Very interesting. So, so you're witnessing all the activity that's going on down on the border. Is it as bad as they say it is?
No. It's not as bad as they say. It's worse.
It's worse.
Yes, both in McAllen, which we call the Rio Grande Valley sector, and like I said, I was just in El Paso for 2 weeks. But the amount of illegals that are coming across is literally in the thousands every day and every night. The news kind of puts it off as 1,000 here and 1,000 there, and then they just brush it off. But it's been every day now for at least the last 8 years. It's been working that hard. Now, obviously, we've had the latest few huge surges by the Central Americans that have come across in El Paso and all. What I witnessed actually myself there in El Paso was in the boot heel of New Mexico, the illegals would come across by, talk about 1,000, 1,500 or so, making it through the desert there. They want to get caught. And while they're getting caught, we're sending as many agents as we can to process them. And in the meantime, the drug runners, the cartels that run the drugs, are going around the ends where there's no more Border Patrol agents because everybody's busy with those thousands of people. The very interesting thing I saw there was when the minors, the actual minors, and I say kids that are obviously lower than 15 years old, they will get sent back to Mexico right down there. The illegals get them back to the southern side, to the Mexican side, so that they can bring them back again to pose as children of the newest immigrants that are coming in. So they're bringing them back and forth. It's just a big loop that they're doing with them down there. It's out of control.
It's amazing, and you're actually the one who witnesses it. This isn't
Yes.
Congress saying one thing, President saying another, and you're actually on the front line seeing the whole thing.
Yes, that's a great thing about my job is I get to see a lot of this firsthand, which when I finally get a chance to see any of the mainstream media news, it's surprising what's being reported as to what I actually see down there. It's normally it's nowhere near the same thing that's going on. And like I said, the fact that they were taking these minors and recirculating them to pose as children of new migrants coming in, that blew me away there. So,
Well, what can I say? We appreciate you taking care of us now, and the reason why we came to have this discussion was because of something that you've done in the past for us, and you served our country also in Afghanistan.
yes.
So we want to talk about that. This book that he wrote, it's called South of Heaven: My Year in Afghanistan. Tell us a little bit about the book, because it's obviously the stories that you went through when you were in Afghanistan, but it will also now is going to be a movie that is going to be released on Wednesday, July the 3rd in Houston, correct?
Yes.
Okay, tell us about the book and the movie, and let's hear about what happened to you while you were in Afghanistan.
Well, obviously, when I found out I was going to be deployed to Afghanistan, I had thought back about my time active duty in Fort Carson, Colorado, and I'd taken a bunch of pictures of friends and things that we were doing there in the Army. And over the years, I'd look back and say, like, wow, I wonder what this person's doing now. I wish I would have taken more pictures here, more pictures there, and just stuff back then. So when I found out I was going to Afghanistan, I decided that I would buy a camera, a digital camera, also a video camera and a digital camera, and a laptop. And I was going to take as many pictures and videos as I could so that, one, I don't plan on going back to Afghanistan, and two, years later, I could look back and say, oh yeah, that's what this place looked like or whatever, and show it to my kids. And all. So that's kind of the impetus of how everything started.
I know. I remember, and I did read your book. It's been a couple of years, but when you first got there wasn't that much activity.
No.
As compared to Iraq. I remember that there was, and this always happens. I always forget the person's name. The movie about the lone survivor.
Yeah, the Navy SEAL team.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned that in this book. So I was actually notified that I was going to be mobilized to go to Afghanistan in September of 2005. At that time, I was actually in Arizona with Customs and Border Protection, working the Border Control Initiative at that time. So I was told I was going to Afghanistan, came home, and started thinking, okay, well, this is pretty good, because at that time Iraq was absolutely on fire, and at that time there were several Apaches that were actually knocked out of the sky by what we call high-end man-portable air defense missiles, man pads, not Stingers, what most people commonly refer to them as, but these were heat-seeking man-portable missiles, that very high-end ones that had knocked down a couple of Apaches in 2005. Also in 2005, right before July 4th, Operation Red Wings had happened in Afghanistan, and that's where basically the Lone Survivor movie and the book came from, which was the SEAL team that was compromised and one person lived, which, as we know, is Marcus Luttrell. So I was kind of happy that I was going to Afghanistan and not Iraq, because really two things. Nothing was going on in Afghanistan, only because the media was all in Iraq. So there was really no news coming from Afghanistan. So I thought, okay, well, that's good, or so I thought. But as time came closer to being deployed, I realized that fighting was starting to ramp up in Afghanistan. It's just the media was all in Iraq, so they weren't reporting it. I ended up coming home for Christmas in 2005, because I was up at Fort Hood mobilizing, getting ready to go overseas, when I was filling out my wills and powers of attorney and all the other paperwork that happens when you're fixing to go to war. And I was here at the house, and my daughter, Shelby, at 10 years old, was in the back patio there feeding our fish. This was at night, and I thought, you know what? I put down the paperwork, looked at her, and walked out to the back patio there, and about 15 feet behind her. She didn't know I was there. I was watching her, and I thought, okay, let me ask her. So I said, Shelby, what do you think about me going to war? She didn't turn around or nothing. She just raised her hand. She said, like, Dad, I know you're going to be okay. You're the best at what you do, and God told me he'll take care of you, so I'm not worried. And I was like, oh, all right. So I left that at that. I wasn't going to ruin that moment there. But I did end up talking to her, and she was very mature for her age, knowing that, yeah, I had to go over there to war, and I'll be coming home. Eric, who was 7 at the time, when I asked him, he basically said, you're going to end up dying. And I'm like, no, that's not necessarily so. So we talked about it for a little bit, but we were ramping up for everything. So when I got to Afghanistan, and finally in February of 2006, things were pretty quiet. It was still very cold, a lot of snow on the ground. All the water faucets and everything were frozen there in the Bagram. Incredibly beautiful country, absolutely beautiful when they're not shooting at you. Mm-hmm. So we had several briefings as we got there, and one of them was about Operation Red Wings. And they had told us basically what had happened. The SEAL team was compromised, but that's when they gave us our blood chits, just like in World War II. And they said that the lone survivor had used his blood chit to get him rescued, so I highly recommend you guys keep this with you at all times. Irregardless.
What is this blood chit?
It is a, and actually I've got it right there. We'll show it here in a little bit, but in probably about 10 different languages, Pashto, Dari, Arabic, Uzbek, it basically says that if I'm giving you this letter, read it in whatever language you can, and it basically says that I'm an American soldier. If you help me, to get back to American forces, you'll be rewarded in some way, shape, or form.
Kind of like what the Flying Tigers flew.
That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
And so we all had ours. Now, granted, maybe 95% of Afghan are illiterate, but we didn't know that then. So we got the briefing on all of Operation Red Wings. And at that time, they had mentioned the valley called the Korengal Valley, which really was no big deal. But that's where Operation Red Wings was happening, in the Korengal Valley. Mm-hmm. It took about a month. We were flying ring routes, which were basically following Chinooks and Blackhawks, replacing soldiers from the different forward operating bases, the FOBs, and then and replacing ammunition, food, and supplies such as that. When I had my first mission into the Korengal Valley itself, going in there, pretty much we got shot at on the way out. The Chinook that I was following radioed real quick that they were taking fire from the right side. We call WASD up the gun weapon action switch. I selected the gun. The gun moves wherever I look. I look to the right, and it's basically a canyon wall. Mm-hmm. I just squeezed off several rounds. And when I say squeezed off several rounds, every time I pull the trigger, 10 bullets come out at a time at 625 rounds per minute. So, and they're all high explosive rounds. And actually, this is one of them right here. Each one of those is a 30 millimeter round. We call them HEDP, high explosive dual purpose rounds. So that round is explosive in both forms. It'll punch through close to about 4 inches of steel, and it has a kill radius like a hand grenade of about 5 meters. So
may I see that real quick?
Oh yeah.
Wow. This would be ideal for home defense.
Yes. So I rattled off about 2 or 3 10-round bursts to the side of us there. Don't know. Never saw the person shooting at us. We just kept flying out of there. The Chinook called back saying that they had casualties in the back of the Chinook. And I thought, crikey. Here we are, one of the first missions, and we've got casualties right away. Landed back at Asadabad, and sure enough, one of the Afghan soldiers was hit in the back on the rib. He survived, but this is what was incredible was he had taken off his body armor right when he got on the helicopter, not even 5 minutes prior, and he was the one that got hit. So, but he lived, so all fine and dandy on that.
Kind of reminds me of that scene in Apocalypse Now, and the guy sits on the helmet.
Yes, that's exactly it. And well, obviously going into war, I thought it was going to be, gun battles and artillery and everything you see in the movies from the get-go, but it never was. It was all very quiet. It was all a lot of quick skirmishes such as that. There was a few that were very intense, and actually one of them that's in the movie, we saved a convoy that was ambushed in what was called the Tigana Valley, which was only about 15 miles to the east of Bagram, but we'd gotten called out on them to basically save them. They were hitting ambushes along an entire, probably about a 19-kilometer valley, and they'd been calling for us for about 2 hours and stuff before the guys higher up finally told us to launch. So but it's all in the movie, and they did an excellent job of telling really what happened, both from the air and the ground on that entire ambush. So getting back to, once I got through to Afghanistan, I just started taking a lot of videos and a lot of pictures, and we got to go to a lot of really great places like the Khyber Pass itself, the actual Khyber Pass. So I took pictures of that. There were minarets from Genghis Khan and Alexander the Great and all those guys all over the country. Lots of destroyed Soviet armor was strewn about in a lot of different places, which every time I'd see like maybe 5 tanks, old Soviet T-55 tanks with their turrets blown off or whatever, you just kind of, wow, there was a fight there. And it was probably, back in the mid-'80s, obviously. But, wow, this was it. This was history in the making right there. So we ended up, I ended up sending a bunch of emails, whenever I could, actually, because the email service was horrible, back home to my wife and my friends and family, saying like, hey, today we flew by the Khyber Pass. Here's a picture of it. Oh, and by the way, we got in a little shootout on the way, on the Kabul River going back to Jalalabad. Oh, and here's Alexander the Great minaret. Here's the Silk Road, all that sort of stuff. And well, I found out after I came home a year later that my emails were getting forwarded to hundreds, if not thousands of people. Friends were telling me that when they'd come to work on Monday morning, their friends at work would say, hey, what did your buddy Daniel write about and pictures of from Afghanistan? Because at that time, like I said, everything was happening in Iraq. So all the news was Iraq. There was no news coming out of Afghanistan. And basically my little podcasts or whatever was the only news coming out of Afghanistan. Very, very limited, though, because, like I said, the internet was absolutely horrible. So when I got back a year and 2 weeks later, looked back and I thought, wow, I wouldn't say we made history, but we were witness to the resurgence of the Taliban, because the fighting had started in February and absolutely cranked up from, at the beginning it was maybe 1 to 2 little fights a week, to the middle of the summer in the fighting season, so to speak. It was ramping up to a fight every day, if not 2 fights every day. And that's for all of us in the Apache side. And then even in September, October, when the snow started falling in the Hindu Kush, and they were all telling us, yeah, the Taliban, they'll all go back to Pakistan for the wintertime, the fighting will slow up. It continued, if not even ramped up even more. One of the final battle sequences in the movie itself is one that's also obviously chapter 10 in my book, but it was based in the Korengal Valley in Afghanistan. It was January 5th, 2007. We'd been fighting in the Korengal Valley all year long. I was a quick reactionary force that day. It had been snowing for the past for the two weeks for Christmas and New Year's there. So we were finally getting to get back to flying. And on this day, the mission was to take a general to all the different forward operating bases, the FOBs, for a morale mission, because we were all fixing to leave after a year being there. So the original Apache that was supposed to have been on this mission, his helmet broke, one of the pilots. The helmets are individual. They're personal helmets. We don't have any spares on the sides. So I ended up taking the mission without being in the briefing whatsoever. So I found out what we were going to be doing on the way to FOB Asadabad. On the way to FOB Asadabad, we heard on the radio that there was a fight going on in the Pesh River Valley leading up to the Korengal Valley from Asadabad. So with that, we had to land at Asadabad. The general got out, went into the Tactical Operations Center, the TOC, and Les and I were sitting there talking when the radio came to life, and it was the TOC asking us if we could go ahead, go into the Pesh River Valley and take care of that fight so that we could take the general to the Korengal Valley. I immediately told them that there's only one Apache, and we're not allowed by SOP to go anywhere in the country single ship. A few seconds later, the TOC told us that the general had authorized us to go single ship. I discussed it with my co-pilot Les, who had turned 60 while we were there that month in Afghanistan, and he'd actually been flying in Vietnam. So we discussed it. I could have turned it down, but I thought, let's just get this mission done, get this day over with. So we went. We got with Dog 37, the vehicle patrol base that was on the ground there at the Pesh River Valley. They led us onto some cave sites where the Taliban had been shooting at them from with RPGs. We shot up a couple of caves. Basically, it's called Fire by Recon by Fire, I should say. And the guys on the ground had radio interpreters that were listening to the Taliban as they were saying that, wow, they almost got us on that shot. Stay still, don't move, the Apache may not get you, and all that. A few minutes later, we get a call on the radio saying that we got to go back to Asadabad because we're not authorized to be out there single ship. So somebody had told the general that he's responsible if anything bad happens to us. So we went back to Asadabad, which was only about maybe 7 miles away. And he then sent his Black Hawk to go with us so we could no longer be single ship. We went back to the same spot, started shooting up some of the caves that they said we almost killed the Taliban for. And on one run, shooting the gun stopped firing. Les tried it, then I tried it. We could hear the gun cycling or moving, but we couldn't, there was no rounds coming out. So we went back to Asadabad, and sure enough, the ground guys came up to refill us with gas and rockets, and they asked us if we needed bullets. I said, yeah, check our gun, make sure we didn't break it. And that's when we found out that we were just out of bullets. So I said, go get more bullets. So they come back, and that's when we find out that they don't have the proper equipment to upload the bullets in the Apache. An upper dupper is what it's called. And I didn't know this, but 2 weeks prior, an untrained person tried refilling the Apache with the 30 millimeter, and he actually broke the entire carrier for the bullets to the Apache. And basically, the Apache is what we call it. It was hard down. It was unflyable. Idaho National Guard, whose Apaches we were using, they were pretty mad. Once the Apache was fixed, they pulled that piece of equipment away, and their so-called armament guy that knew what he was doing pulled him out of there. We didn't know this on that day, so therefore they had nothing to load us up with. Made a couple suggestions that maybe we can run on down to Jalalabad, get our guys to put bullets in us, put gas in us. We'll be back in 45 minutes and we can head on to the Korengal Valley. At that time, I saw the general running out to the Black Hawk in front of us, and Archangel, the Black Hawk in front of us, called us on the radio and said, like, hey, you guys have got rockets and missiles, so we're going. The general wants to go right now. And oh, by the way, can you guys lead us into the Korengal Valley? Because we've never been there before. And so we're both, Les and I, are going like, that's crazy, because we'd been going there all year long. And what we found out later, well after this, was that he was the general's so-called driver. And he'd only been going from Bagram Air Base to Kabul, about a 30-minute flight back and forth all year long with the general. So he'd never been to the Korengal Valley. I didn't know this. So he kind of suggested that, hey, I told him, it's not right for us to follow you in there. We cover you better from behind. And that's when he said, well, you can shoot up the caves as you're going in there just in case, whatever. So I thought, so I reluctantly said yes. We flew him into the Korengal Valley, led him right over to the Korengal outpost, and it shows it very well in the movie. That's kind of where it pretty much kicks in. They came under attack while they were there on the ground. They left one of the crew chiefs on the ground, the Black Hawk did, as it was told to leave immediately because they were under attack. The crew chief, which I found out his name was Specialist White, was not in the left crew chief's seat. When the Black Hawk took off to the south of the Korengal Valley, which is basically the Box Canyon end of it, I did not know they were under fire. The ground guy, the ground controller at the outpost said in a very tense voice, said like, egress to the north, which I took that as a question of some sort. So I responded with, well, yeah, both Deadwood, my call sign, and Archangel, the Black Hawk, are egress in the north this time. And then you can hear me on the intercom saying like, come on, Bubba, start your turn now. Don't go any farther south. To which Archangel calls us up saying, where are you guys at? I'm passing smoke right now, possible poo site, which is point of origin. They were flying over the guys shooting at them from the south. Mm-hmm. We couldn't see that. So I said, like, I'm at your right 5 o'clock high. Start your left turn to go any farther south. To which he continued further south, and to which Les and I were going like, where are they getting shot at from? Who's getting shot at? What's going on? Finally, I said, like, don't go any farther south. Start your left turn now. And then you could see him on the video that he's making his left turn finally right over Taliban town. The difference between he and I was maybe 500 feet above the ground and he was maybe 50 feet above the ground. So he was getting shot at the entire time. He starts his left turn to the north, going right back to the Korengal outpost when I'm following him once again to his right wing. And it was at that point, and I found this out several years later when I'd gotten a really good view of the video that I was taking, that I was taking a lot of ground fire coming off my right side. Never saw it because I was looking to the left of the Black Hawk. And going back and look at it now, I mean, it's just they were missing me, thank God, but just strings of bullets coming at me to the right that I never saw. And then several more bullets coming at me from right in front of me. So they ended up, the Black Hawk flew right back towards the Korengal outpost, and he made a turn towards me. Mm-hmm. To my right was the ridgeline. The sun was just coming over the ridgeline. I saw a flash at the base of the mast for his rotor head, which is chrome anyway. I thought it was the sun shining off of that mast. What it was an RPG had been fired from his left side that went between the blades themselves and the body of the Black Hawk, and several more RPGs fired from his right off to his left. They both missed him, and then everybody was shooting at him. That's when you can see in the video, you can see me going like, oh, there they are. I roll in hard, telling the Black Hawk to continue going. I'm driving straight at the guys that are shooting, the Taliban that are shooting at him, in hopes of them shooting at me instead of him. I mean, I thought literally he was going to explode. There were so many bullets going at him. Thankfully, I could see the Taliban shooting at him and looking up over their right shoulders at me coming at him, coming out of the sun, basically. And I could only think they were saying like, oh, sweet baby Jesus, here it comes. I had no bullets. I was too close. This sounds kind of corny. I was too close, and the Korengal outpost was right on the other side of the ravine, so I couldn't take a rocket shot because I would have overshot and hit the Korengal outpost. So I just drove straight at the Taliban, hoping for them to shoot at me, which, from what I could tell, they did, to stop shooting at the Black Hawk. I rolled back hard right, pulling up to the left, telling the Black Hawk, get out of here. I make one last radio call, because you never know. In combat, you just never know. I call up the Korengal outpost, asking them, understand you have nobody up here. Because God forbid, that's some rogue platoon for whatever reason. You never know. Combat is crazy that they've just decided to start shooting at Black Hawks and Apaches. But I just wanted to make absolutely sure there was no friendlies there. As I pull down, roll in front of them, you can hear Les saying, oh, there they are, and I'm saying, oh, there they are. And it was like the paparazzi. It was just flash bulbs, but it was all of them shooting at us. At that point, the bullets, I can literally, we call it going into time compression. It's you're thinking so fast, this event is so unbelievable, your vision becomes way better than 2010. There's no sound. It's like time slows down, but you are processing everything so fast. I could see the bullets coming by me, all over the canopy, right through us and all. And I thought, Jesus, this is it. There were so many bullets fired at us. I thought Les, who was in the front seat at the time, I thought I was going to see his head explode up against the blast shield between us. At that time, that's when I saw my wife and my kids at the front of the house saying, this is this is going on. And like I said, I don't want to give it away, but it's in the movie. Mm-hmm. I finally come back, so to speak, into the cockpit, and I'm saying, I'm out of here. I pulled back on the stick to get out of the stream of gunfire, and then I'm saying, no, I'm not. I'm going to kill these people. And so I push it back over and start squeezing the trigger. But when I push the helicopter's nose back over to line up on them, I was in a negative G push. Basically, all the dirt, all the candy wrappers, everything slaps to the ceiling of the canopy. Everything's just like in outer space. It's everything's weightless. And the Apache has a safety inhibit, will not let me fire rockets if it's less than a half a positive G. My G-Whiz meter was pegged out at negative 1.5 Gs on that push. I saw that later after the whole deal. I pulled back on the stick, trying to get the aircraft to get at least a half a positive G. The whole time I'm pulling the trigger, trying to get the rockets to come out. And I say it's kind of funny, it was edited out, but the whole time I'm dropping the F-bomb every time I'm pulling the trigger because nothing's coming out. I'm just F, 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 F. And finally, one rocket comes out. At that time, actually, I see amongst all the flashes of the gunfire, I see a puff of dust pop up, a flash, and then I see this red, which I thought at that time was a missile coming at me. And I thought it was going to hit the bottom of the Apache. And then at that time also, all this is happening so fast, but I'm thinking so fast that it felt like it lasted forever. I'm thinking, okay, if the missile hits the bottom of the Apache, hopefully I can at least crash land at least back to the outpost, just not even half a mile away. And I'm thinking, no, I'm not. And that's when I'm pulling the trigger, trying to squeeze. And unbelievably, I get one rocket out, and it hits center mass, right where they are all shooting at me. Pull hard left, roll out, throw a bunch of flares out as I'm trying to talk on the radio, which is actually, it's kind of funny now afterwards, but I'm telling the Korengal outpost to shoot at them. Mm-hmm. The same thumb activates the radio and the flares. And so in the middle of my radio transmission, I'm popping flares and still talking, but the radio still is now not transmitting. You can hear me say, damn it, get back to the radio, throw a bunch of flares out, extend a little bit, come back around, tell them I'm fixing to shoot these people and to get a fire mission going and all. And that's where Sergeant Vile comes in. Like I said, I found out afterwards that the crew chief, if he would have stayed in that Black Hawk, he would have gotten hit right in the head because one of the bullets that was fired at that Black Hawk went right through where his head would have been and hit the generator in the Black Hawk. Sergeant Vile, he was the mortar ballistics computer operator. They were starting a fire mission, but they were running down through the fob when all the shooting started, and he got hit in the arm. And I'd heard that afterwards that a person was shot in the arm, but he's okay. They brought him back to Bagram to get fixed up. So found out that afterwards that killed possibly 10 is what they figured on that day. And then a real interesting thing was in the movie, I didn't know about any of this that was happening on the ground until February of this year when we were just finishing the movie, and we got in touch with the people with Sergeant Vile and General Tata. He told us all about him and how heroic he was in everything he did. And that's when I saw the first pictures of myself taken by what we call the Christians in Action guy, or CIA. Operator was on the ground there in the outpost, and he'd taken a bunch of pictures of me in the battle, and I'd never seen those until February of this year. So that was like gut-wrenching and all that.
Will they be in the movie?
They will be in the movie, yes. On the Tigana Valley ambush, we were still trying to get in touch with the main convoy, Vandal 16 Matt Hull, that was still to the south. We didn't know this at the time. As we were working our way to the south of the valley, we realized that, wow, there's a convoy. There was like 4 vehicles on the main road. They were shooting to the east across a ravine into an orchard. And so we thought, that's got to be them. So we lined up to take shots on them. And actually, I was so happy finally to get in touch with the convoy that we were supposed to be rescuing that when I made my first run in, I got all excited, pulled the trigger, fired a white phosphorus round, and it was way short and way off key. I thought, how stupid could I be? At least, my co-pilot, shot into the grove with a 30 millimeter at that time. And we rolled back around again, and this time I took my time, said, stop, calm down, take a good shot this time. And so we did. So I'd take 3 more rocket shots into the orchard, fire some rockets into there, and Brian and the other Apache and Ross and the other Apache, they're taking shots in the orchard and all this. And right about that time, Vandal 16 calls on the radio, says like, hey, we're a convoy to the south. Who are you guys shooting up? And that's when, just cold chills ran through my blood. I'm like, oh my God, who are we shooting? Who did we just kill? I backed off on the next run that I was going to come in on, and Ross was talking to him on the radio and said, okay, we're shooting to an orchard. We're shooting to the east across the ravine. We've got the convoy, 4 vehicles right here in front of us. And he's going like, yeah, but that's not us. I think you're to our north. And here's the new grid coordinates. And Ross put them in, and sure enough, they were to the south. Brian takes the middle of the valley. We're headed to the south. I take his right wing up against the wall in the valley, headed to the south, going as fast as we can, thinking like, oh man, here we go. And the whole time I'm thinking like, God, who did we just shoot? One of the rocket runs I made over that orchard, and there was a big house next to it. As I came flying over it, I looked down at that house, and there was a man crouched down, covering his ears in that house. And we were shooting up his orchard, and I thought, God. All I could think then was... So, find out later in the movie that, yeah, we were okay shooting that place up. That was the actual quick reactionary force on the ground that was sent to help out the ground convoy to the further south, and they got caught in an ambush right there. So it wasn't anybody that didn't need shooting at that time. But I didn't know that until well afterwards. So we're headed south, going as fast as we can. Brian's running down the middle, maybe about 100 feet over the trees. Like I said, I'm to his right wing, say about 200 meters to his right. And right as he gets over this another orchard, sure enough, I just see a volley of 5-7 RPGs, just with special airburst RPGs blowing up right behind him as he flew over. And right then, Vandal 16 says, like, that's the orchard right there. That's where they're shooting from. I slap the stick hard left and line up firing 3 high explosive rockets and then following up with the gun as we're flying right over it. And I'm going to tell you right now, that felt freaking great, man. Just you'll hear it in the movie, too. You can tell that I'm very, very happy firing those rockets. Now that we've got the bad guys and the real convoy in sight, we're like, all right, let's commence to sending these people up to their virgins. And also, I'm coming in from the south, kind of out of the sun. Brian's coming in out of the north. We're just taking turns, just waylaying away at all these Taliban, at the enemy sitting in that orchard and all to win. I look down and I notice that the road has got a bunch of vehicles headed north, and I'm like, holy mackerel, the convoy's left. They're headed north. So I tell Brian, what do we do? Stay here? Or do we go with the convoy? He says, get with the convoy. So I come out of the sky, coming right over them, about 100 feet, and letting them know that, hey, man, we're with you. Because, I found out later that Vandal 16 was saying that the roads were so bad, they could do maybe 30, 40 miles an hour, but just almost like the roads in Houston. Just nothing but holes and everything else. They couldn't talk on the radio only because they were hanging on inside the vehicles. They got up to the next small village, so to speak, where they had to slow down. It looked like an old Western town. Literally looked like an old Western town with adobe houses on both sides. So flew over it low and fast, and hopefully letting the people there know that our convoy's coming through. Don't mess with them. Mm-hmm. And so did a high circle over them as the convoy's rolling in there. And as Matt Hall said, they were just sticking their rifles over the ledges, over the walls, shooting at whatever they could. It wasn't accurate fire at all, but he yells out on the radio, they're shooting from the rooftops, which I was right above the village there, and the last vehicle just left that little hamlet, so to speak, and I thought, okay, I'm going to put a rocket right through the roof of this house. And so I shoved the nose over, I'm lining up, I'm thinking, no, I'm not going to do it. Pulled out, circled away, and thinking like, okay, before I go putting a rocket through this house and possibly killing somebody innocent, let me take some time here. The convoy's already through the hamlet. There's still a lot of people in that country, as we found out, that don't want to be in the war. They're just normal people living their lives. Mm-hmm. The war's just come through them, and God forbid I kill a kid. So in the end, I'm glad I did. That I backed off, did not take that shot. And so the convoy continues on to the next little hamlet that was like a one street little with shops on both sides. And found out later that everybody in that little area was actually bad. So we were going up and down that street, dropping flares and all. And what the Taliban actually was doing was they were getting mirrors, and they would reflect the sun at us, so it would look like a flash. And we found out later that the reason they were doing that was somebody had told them that our, what we call CMOS, Common Missile Warning System, is what we call it, CMWS, it activates and fires flares from the flash of a missile being launched. And somebody told them, for whatever reason, that if you can reflect the sun back on them, it'll launch flares on us. That's not true, but because we've got an IR filter, a filter that takes away the sun's actions on it. But one guy was sitting there flashing at me underneath this awning in one of the shops, and I thought, all right. So I lined right up at him. I was going to head at him, and I thought, like, legally I can't kill him. So right as I'm coming at him, maybe about 200 meters out, I fire a bunch of flares, and I can see his eyes get big, and he jumps inside the house. So he probably thought I'd fired at him. But now the convoy goes rolling through there, no problems. And maybe about a quarter of a mile later, we saw a motorcycle on the road, on the side of the road. And it seems like the Taliban were all issued these old 19 and 70s Honda CB100s with a little chrome little gas tank on the sides. There, everybody had them. And this guy apparently had gone out of the town, parked his motorcycle, ran off into the ditch there, and he was shooting at the convoy as they were going by. And that's when Vandal 16 says, they're shooting from the fields, they're shooting from the fields. Happened to be in a spot, front seater saw him. He shot at him with the gun. Came back around, I never saw him. And that's when he said that we're going to, if it was me, I would be hiding in this little ditch with some trees in it. And at that point, we'd gotten so good with shooting rockets. I mean, I could put a rocket in a window at a mile away, no problem. And so I lined up, fired a rocket right exactly where I wanted it. And then that's when Vandal 16 yells on the radio, good shot, good shot. And also, right about then, they make it to the very end of the valley, right back at the fob where they were intending to go. And what was really funny on that, we're circling, they're in the fob, they tell us they're in the fob. We'll go back and get the Ranger later. And my front seater goes like, Ranger? They leave an Army Ranger in the back? I'm like, I don't know. Because one of the trucks that the Taliban or the Afghan National Army uses are Ford Ranger pickup trucks. Mm-hmm. And so it had gotten a bullet hole through one of the its engine block, and it died on the uphill going into the fob. So we circled for a few more minutes, made sure everything was good, and then literally I had run out of bullets and rockets. Brian, he'd run out of bullets, and we headed back to Bagram, and a great day. I mean, took pictures. We landed. It's kind of funny because we took pictures of all four of us, at the back of Brian's aircraft because he had bullet holes on his tail in the drive shaft and all that. And then we took some pictures of mine because we had bullet holes in the blades and stuff like that. But it was kind of like a badge of honor coming back with bullet holes on your aircraft. Crew chiefs are going like, God, you guys damaging my aircraft again. Now I got to fix it. But it was good. That was a great mission that day.
When you look back at all this, fondness, PTSD, I know you were in a helicopter crash which caused some
issues, yeah.
Some issues for you. When you think back, a lot of people who came back from, say, World War II or Vietnam didn't want to talk about their experiences.
Yeah.
Do you feel that same way, or do you feel like, you know what, a lot of people had it far worse? I mean, how are your thoughts on that?
When I was in a crash in the Apache in 1995, I would say bulletproof at the time, 30-something years old, I think 32. So nothing could stop me. That was a shot to the gut that, wow, I'm mortal. Yeah. But being an attack helicopter pilot, infantry, federal agent, and all that good stuff, you don't admit to anything like that. I repressed it for years. And it wasn't until, obviously, we went to Afghanistan when it came back, and it came back with a vengeance. I didn't know what it was, and I say it came back. All of a sudden, I was getting anxiety attacks and claustrophobia and all. I didn't realize it, but I'd been having those anxiety attacks, but I was holding them off for years. But it was pretty difficult to keep everything down with war. Mm-hmm. I didn't, well, it's kind of like everybody says, you don't want to admit to it because nobody admits to it. Mm-hmm. I did not want to admit to it because as a pilot, and back then, and I think they still do now, I'm not sure, but for my flight physical, if you're diagnosed with PTSD, you're automatically grounded for 2 years. And then you have to fight to get your medical back. Mm-hmm. And so that would have been my job. So yeah, I kind of, I didn't realize till afterwards, but writing the book was absolutely great therapy for getting through PTS. Now I say I was never diagnosed with PTS. I did see a VA psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever you call him. He did me a huge favor. He put me down as panic anxiety notwithstanding claustrophobia. Mm-hmm. He did not put PTS. He very well could have, but basically he did me a huge favor. But when all said and done, yeah. I fight it every day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hope that doesn't bring back memories. We have thunder outside.
Yeah,
so.
There's a nice good storm coming through. And we say bringing it back. Yeah, it's there were times when I came back, the flashes of cell towers when I was flying over Houston. Mm-hmm. That's literally the exact way an RPG, when it's fired at you, you get that little white flash real quick, just off the corner of your eye, and I would look. Mm-hmm. I was waking up, and I come to find out later, everybody just about has the same stuff. Waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, nightmares, and it's just reliving different battles, reliving different stuff. I realized I needed help. I realized that wasn't right. I could have easily have gone down the road that some have, which is, alcohol, drugs, whatever you want to call it. But, I had my family and I had my job, mm-hmm. and I knew better. Mm-hmm. I went on my own to get help. And I had to do it through my civilian job because the VA at the time in 2007 and 8, they were going through their pains at that time. And I had a bad run-in with a VA doctor. So I said, I'm not even going to go that route. I'm going to pay for this on my own, not let anybody know about it, and just do it all on my own. So that's kind of, that's how I've dealt with it.
Okay. Do you have any, I want to say, what is the one memory that you will remember the most? Was it something that we discussed, or,
The one big man, wow. The best, there was a lot of memories. The biggest one was coming home to my family.
That's the best one.
Yeah, it was, the welcoming home at Fort Hood, and my daughter, saying, I told you, God said you'd be back, and I was. So yeah, that's the one that, in the end, I still think about all the guys we lost. Tim Flanagan, Eric Totten, the guys in the Chinook, all 10 of them. But yeah, and in the end of the movie, I made sure, the Angel Scroll is there. It's 70 people that were killed, guys and girls there in that year in Afghanistan, 2006 and 2007 that I was there. That's at the end of the movie. And it's, when you look at it, it's heart-wrenching.
Any final thoughts that you want to tell the audience?
The movie is... in the last of the series, Heroes of Valor series, but I've already talked to several veterans that absolutely loved it, and the fact that it brings out a lot of what really happened in Afghanistan, or in combat, not just Afghanistan, but in combat, and has allowed a lot of families to open up that they never opened up before about what combat's like, and what, and basically we call it digital therapy, and letting people open up about PTSD or any other problems. Okay,
so now I do recommend this book. I read it. I gave it 5 stars. Yes. And now, if someone wants to see your movie, what do they need to do?
Currently, the movie will be premiering July 3rd at the Greenway Grand Palace 24 and RPX Theater on 3839 Wesleyan. July 3rd at 7 o'clock. I'm going to be there at 6, kind of like a social hour beforehand. You get tickets on the webpage. You have to go through, I'll have to put it on there because it's not a normal name.
We'll include it.
Okay. And then we will be selling tickets there. It'll just kind of be a little bit of a hassle, but we will sell tickets there. I highly recommend this movie. For both people, veterans, and people that have never been in the military. This will definitely let you know what real combat's like.
Okay, and you'll be there for question and answer session.
Yes, and I'll be there before and afterwards, question and answers and all.
Okay. Well, Daniel, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very much appreciate you spending time with us to relate your experiences, and we thank you for everything you've done for our country and for our freedom.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm Alan Wakim with the Sons of History. We want to thank again Daniel Flores for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed this broadcast, and we will continue meeting with heroes just like this gentleman for posterity and for our country. Thank you, and have a good day, and God bless you.